Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Keep Coding podcast. I am extremely happy today because I have one of the people I've been watching, well, for years now, live streaming on Twitch, and he's one of the reasons why I'm actually live streaming all this here on YouTube for you. So please welcome in the chat, Jeff Fritz. And hello, Jeff.
Hello, how's it going, Nick?
I'm great. Thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh! You've been watching me for a while. It feels like I only started streaming yesterday.
Well, I checked that, and you've been streaming. Has it been on and off for 5 years technically?
So it's been every week since November 2017, I want to say.
So yeah. I couldn't find data all the way back there. So even then, you were doing it every week.
Yeah, every week, Tuesdays, Thursdays. I dropped Wednesdays and Fridays in there at one point. The weekend was really important for me to do something on Saturday or Sunday morning, and the continuous and pre-scheduled, keeping that consistency. Gosh, you've been consistent with publishing videos. It gets people coming back. It becomes appointment television. And that's something that has been important for me to be that voice that's there that folks can depend on and come back to.
That's awesome. Yeah, Twitch is way better at helping people visualize your schedule as a streamer. It has this very nice sort of calendar view. Yeah. And as long as you can stick to that, like we don't really have that on YouTube. You can schedule it and people can get like notify me. But even notifications is very weird on YouTube.
It's interesting the difference in streaming between the two platforms. And you're right, Twitch being completely live focused. They want that schedule in front of you. They want to get you a notification when folks go live. But you can't get Twitch on smart TVs easily. You can't get it on some devices. It's an extra app to go and find for your phone or your tablet. It's not as ubiquitous as YouTube is, just everywhere. But then there's the difference in the chat experiences. It's interesting.
Those are all topics I find intriguing as well, and I have my own experiences with what I like and don't like. We're gonna talk about that definitely. But I actually want to take it a bit back and say I was looking at your career progression, starting as a developer and then working for Telerik, and then from Telerik moving into Microsoft. And you've been there now for the better part of 8 years and a bit. Yep. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, 8 years. It'll be 9 in November for me.
And 10 is when you get is there a plaque that you get at 10?
So there's a crystal trophy that you can opt to receive every 5 years. So 5 years, there's a little blue crystal that you get at 10. I think it's a larger yellow crystal. 15, there's another one. And at 20, there's actually crystals in the conference center. If you go attend a conference like VS Live or some other event at Microsoft, there's a briefing center that's a conference center on campus. And there's these very large, 3 foot tall, very thick crystals. All the employees who've worked 20 years, their names are etched on those crystals.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, right? Like
I'd be really interested to see who's there from the people I know.
Yeah.
Visible right? Microsoft employees like you, like David, like Scott, they don't really leave Microsoft. You folks just stay.
When I think about what would be involved for me to leave Microsoft, so much of my brand identity is tied to these products. If I were to go somewhere else and work on similar products, how much of that am I changing? Am I redoing? I don't know. I feel like my vision, what I want to do, what I want to engage with folks in chat. How you doing there, chat? I am watching the chat room. What I want to do is encourage folks to be successful. And I get it. I have such a great voice and platform with the Microsoft tools and products that, okay, there's there's a very small list of things that I can't work with because they're competitors. Okay. But I can pretty much do what I want to work with our products to help encourage folks to improve, to do better, to grow their careers. And that really that lights me up. So
That's, yeah. I mean, that is sick. The biggest highs that I used to get when I was working full time, and now it's a different story, but seeing your product being used and then
yes.
taking that feedback and applying it on the product to make it better and then see people happy, there's nothing better than this, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh. When folks' eyes light up, oh my gosh, you just showed me something. Your product just gave me something that is going to save me hours that I'm going to take back to the project team at the office, and we're going to be able to do something really cool with this. Phenomenal. Just reaction, and it makes me feel like I delivered the right product. I wrote the right content. I answered questions. I shared sample code that solved a problem. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all doing. Just trying to solve problems for folks.
Yeah. Awesome. So you are officially entitled a principal program manager for Microsoft. You're also the executive producer for the .NET Conf, which we had a couple of months ago, celebrating the launch of .NET 7.
That's right.
But you've also worked, that wasn't always obviously what you were doing. You worked on products like NuGet, ASP.NET, .NET, and before you were the executive producer, you were also one of the 3 producers of .NET Conf, right?
Yep.
So quite the story here, because while you were doing all that, you also managed to build an audience on Twitch, live coding and building an application on the wild. So you've been doing that for 5 years now, since November 2017.
Yeah.
And amounted 21,000 followers on Twitch and an average viewership of 153 people, given the stats I can see on Twitch Tracker. So, obviously you have a family as well. To me, it's always like people ask me, how do you manage to do everything that you do, Nick? But the truth is, like, people like you was always like my question, how these people with high positions than me, how did they manage to do that, and the family? Because I don't have kids, I don't have anything. So for me, it's way easier. How do you balance all that?
It's tricky. I work from home, so there's no commute. I just walk into my spare bedroom here, and I've turned this into a home studio over the years. It's something that planning my time is important. When we talked about live streaming, the big thing for me has been that consistency. Tuesdays, Thursdays, weekends, whenever it might be, having that time blocked on my schedule. And when I'm not live streaming, I'm going to find maybe an hour or 2 outside of that to work on things for the live stream, whether it's build samples, write a script for things, and grind through and build what I need for that. And then the reuse game kicks in. My manager, when I worked at Telerik, when I first got into developer advocacy and promoting product use, was reuse as much as possible. Don't write content and use it just once. Use it at least 3 times. So things that you see me do on a live stream, I repackage as a presentation that I'll deliver at a dev intersection, a VS Live, whatever conference it might be. I'll summarize some of that content and I'll push it into a blog post. DevTO, Code Project, my own blog, wherever, Microsoft blog. So I'm not reinventing myself. I'm not going and building new content all the time. I build new content over the course of the week and then reuse it for the better part of the next week or so, or the next month. I was in a process and a grind where every December I would write, here's the presentations I want to give in the next year. And I might get some initial slide concepts put together. But for the job that I was doing then, it was it was constantly tuning, rebuilding, and delivering talks. I wasn't even thinking about building YouTube videos. It was let's just put together what this talk is going to be, and I'll tune and add features as new product comes out, as new things happen out on the web or whatever. And it was a way for me to manage and push down the amount of content that I was constantly writing by just evolving the same content again and again and again. Well, that's effectively what I'm still doing. So I do try to keep a tight schedule where 8 a.m., 9 a.m. my time, that's when I'm going to start. I start my day and I get out to about 5, and that's the end of my day. The folks that I work with know this. They see when my schedule starts and stops. Nick, I had to block time on my schedule for dinner because I had people scheduling meetings because they're on the West Coast. They're 3 hours behind me. They're scheduling meetings when I should be eating dinner. I'm like, well, that's not right. So then the smart folks that I work with said, well, I'm just going to schedule an hour to meet with Jeff after dinner. That's not going to work either. So I started blocking, okay, dinner and then Fritz evening for 2 hours. And if you want to talk to me after that, 8 p.m. my time, you better have a really good reason. And I'm going to reject most of them. But every now and again, something comes up and I need to have a conversation then. The weird things happen when there's a meeting with executive folks and they schedule it for midnight my time because it's 9 p.m. their time and they're talking to folks overseas. And I'm like, you want me to have a meeting at midnight? Like, I'll gently push back. Like, are you sure? And 9 times out of 10, okay, we can work with that. But reusing content is really my key. And something that I've struggled with and had a great conversation with folks after my stream yesterday is I had great conversations on stream. We did something really cool. How do I summarize that into 5, 10, 15-minute YouTube video and republish? It almost feels like I need to re-record. And then I get into the editing game. It's like, do I really want to be spending my time doing that? Okay, I can hire an editor to do those things, but it's how can I get more folks to do more things to help me so I can focus on either building content, planning events, these types of things.
The interesting thing about how you approach streaming, and like full disclosure, I'm a huge Twitch fan. Like if I could be streaming on Twitch, I would exclusively. Well, ideally, Twitch would have a better partner program and I could stream in both places at the same time, but they don't allow that, so I had to choose. Technically, I still can if I'm not affiliate or I'm not a partner, whatever.
Yeah.
The problem is that I don't want to be moderating 2 chats because a YouTube chat and Twitch chat is very different. And we can talk about that in a second, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because most Twitch streamers, successful ones, actually plan the stream in a way that it can be chopped off to be a YouTube video or multiple videos. Mm-hmm. So you see people like Ludwig, not so much XQC, but like Miskiff or whatever, like Asmongold. Mm-hmm. They plan it in a way that their editors, while they're streaming, download it, chop it, it goes on YouTube, just thousands of views. And you don't really do that. I've seen your YouTube videos, and I think it was VODs at the beginning as it was uncut. And then you tried, I think I saw some minimal API stuff.
Tried to get that very scripted.
Yeah, very scripted, like teaching, sort of lecture type situation. But not the, I planned the stream to be a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Here's the YouTube video.
And what I've found, let's back up for a second. Folks do try to multi-stream. There are a couple folks that do multi-stream, right? And they'll syndicate out to both YouTube and Twitch. They haven't been caught yet. But the flip side of being caught is Twitch hasn't enforced it either. It's clearly in our contracts that you can't do this. And for a while, when I first started streaming, I got a gentle tap on the shoulder from some folks on the Xbox team. They said, it'd be really nice if you streamed on Mixer. Okay. Are you okay if I multi-stream to Mixer and Twitch? that was an experience. I used a product called Restream to target both, and the problem with Mixer became clear the more and more I used it. And we don't need to talk about Mixer, but we could see them slowly getting, things weren't succeeding for them. But there are folks that do multi-stream to YouTube and Twitch. I do that with my Monday morning streams I do on the Visual Studio channel. It's on the .NET channel here on YouTube. The trick there is we negotiated a brand channel with the folks at Twitch. So while it is a partner channel and has all the benefits of partner, commercials still run on it. It does get all the transcoding features on Twitch, but I can multi-stream when I'm on that channel. Fine, no big deal. And managing the chat between the two is crazy. There's definitely a different culture, I'll say, between the two services. And that's a whole nother discussion. I've tried doing let's build a segment. Let's do 15, 20 minutes. We're going to focus on just this. But the essence of live streaming, the whole reason I got into live streaming, the discussion with the chat room, inevitably just sweeps me up, and I get into that discussion. And what was going to be 10, 15 minutes on topic A ends up being, you know what? There's a really good idea here from Skippy in chat. And let's take a look at that. And 15 minutes turns into 20 minutes, turns into 25 minutes with a really good discussion in there with chat. And what I've learned the hard way is folks on YouTube hate when you talk to chat. If you're looking at a YouTube video and the presenter is talking to chat, they can't stand it. I've literally had people write into my comments, this guy needs to be fired because he's not addressing and discussing the content. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, even when I open up the video with, hey, this is a discussion, I'm talking to chat, you're watching a recording, check out the live chat, and I'm going to have the live chat on screen so you can see what I'm addressing and talking to. Folks on YouTube are like, no, I don't want to see this. This is 2 hours of discussion and answering these deep questions on topics. No, don't want that. Like, oh, okay. That's part of that culture difference, and I get it. I do.
Which is interesting, because that is the reason why I personally don't like, for my streams, to do live coding. Because I like the interaction with chat asks questions, but I never, you've been in Kliptok and we're going to go there as well.
Oh, sure.
But I can't be building a product that, maybe I'm not capable enough, I don't know. But I can't be building a product and also try to keep a conversation with chat and do both equally well. So I choose to focus on trivial problems, or, let's chat GPTs out. Let's go play around. Sure. What can it gonna do? And then you can have a discussion with chat, and then it's fantastic.
So, okay, let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
By taking those bite-sized bits, hey, let's just focus on doing this one thing and being kind of heads down and focusing on that. Yeah, you get through that task pretty well. Folks get to watch and see and understand that. And then you can back off and answer questions and talk for a little bit. That's a fantastic model to go after. And to your point earlier, makes it very editable and reusable as a YouTube video or something in the future. Even TikTok content. And don't get me started on TikTok content.
Oh no, I will get you started because I have something to say on that.
But I got into streaming because I wanted to force those conversations with folks in the community. I was blogging. I was the guy who was writing the blog posts for the .NET team. Hey, look, we've got Visual Basic working with .NET Core. Woo, okay. And then I waited for a couple days to see responses, comments on the blog posts. And it 3 days later, 5 days later, getting a response to a blog post I wrote a week and a half prior, but it was only published at the beginning of this week, was frustrating because the conversation ended up being drug out and missed the point. And there were even folks coming back and commenting weeks later, and we'd already moved on, and the next thing was happening. And I really got to go back and talk about that. Friends of mine say that live streaming, live coding the way I do is my ADHD personified. I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, but when you have all these bells and whistles and alerts and things going off and chat talking and pausing and talking to them, my Lord, it is distracting. That said, though, there's a respect that I have for the chat room because they've taken time to tune in, to join, to ask questions, that I make it a point that every person who's in chat, I don't care if you've got a purple check mark next to your name because you're a partner. I don't care if you've got nothing next to your name because it's the first time you're tuning in. I'm going to give you the respect of reading your message. I might read it out loud, and I'm going to acknowledge you. One way or the other, I'm going to acknowledge you and make sure that you feel part of whatever project it is that I'm working on, or code that I'm tweaking, or whatever it might be. It's that, and that's just something that I set from the get-go. And when I tune in and watch other folks who don't look at chat at all, or they only read chat for folks that paid the $5 for a super chat entry to pop up on screen, I get it. When you get to a certain size, you just can't engage with everybody. And that's what moderators help with. But that's what I feel is important, is fostering and encouraging that community. And it served me well. I've been able to help other streamers, other folks that want to get into this. It absolutely is hard to focus and do some of that stuff while writing code. Totally is. But the flip side of that is, if we were working in an office and you were sitting in a cube, you'd have people stopping by. Hey, Jeff, did you see the thing I was working on and this doesn't quite work right? And you have to go through that. But on the flip side also is, hey, Nick, I was looking at this thing over here, writing a custom attribute. Do you know how to? And you can jump in and comment and encourage. That, to me, is the power of live coding and live streaming.
Sometimes, and I see that mostly on other people's chat, because obviously you don't want to be mean to your chat. It's your viewers, right? There's a lot of like backseat coding going on, especially in females chat rooms, as if I know better. I'll tell you. I see that a lot.
It's horrible. It's terrible. When I'm on somebody's channel and somebody starts doing that, if they've given me the VIP rights, moderator rights, I'm going to let them get out one, maybe two statements, and then I'm going to, hey, buddy, let's let them go through and discover here. It's okay to say, there's a problem here you might need to fix. Or, oh, I saw this before. I have a link to a blog post or some docs that can help you out with this. It's okay to do that. But to go through and say, in really backseat code, oh gosh, this is a terrible way to do these things. You should never be. Why would you choose to do this? I had somebody questioning the use of my spaces in my code. Like, go away. Like, sorry. We need to encourage more folks that are not men, and quite frankly, folks who are not North American men, to get involved with this type of media. There's so much that you can do, but I also appreciate and understand there's a huge investment to make this happen. I've got lights and soundproofing, and we've both got, it looks like we've both got the same microphone here and cameras and all. It's a lot to get started. You don't need all of it to get started, but yeah, we need to encourage and support the rest of our community. And that's another piece to the live coding that I've made sure to step up and continue to do. I don't just produce and walk away. I go and hang out in other people's channels, listen and jump in appropriately at other times.
I want to take it back a little bit because it's good to, now see me live streaming a podcast and you live streaming, building Kliptok.
Sure.
But how and why did you start all those years ago? Because I'm not even quite sure if software development was a category on Twitch. I think it was under creative back then, wasn't it?
It was. So when I started way back then, I had spoken to a couple friends at a few conferences about how frustrated I was with blogging, and how I spent all this time in writing, and I was told, it's funny, I was told when I was in high school that I was not a very good writer. I was not a strong writer of essays and other content. And I published a book. I was writing blog posts for the largest software company in the world. It was something that I wasn't comfortable doing, but I figured out how to do. And I missed the engagement of talking and hanging out with folks. So I started talking to some people and getting the mindset of, I had produced a bunch of videos for Pluralsight and Wintellect Now and even for Microsoft. Hey, why don't I do a podcast? I can get reaction a little bit faster on that. Podcasting's a thing. And a couple folks that produce some very large podcasts even said to me at the time, "Oh my gosh, you'd be fantastic doing a podcast. You've got the voice for it, you've got the attitude, you've got the interview chops, you've hosted panels at various events. This would be great." And a friend of mine at a local regional conference here in the Pennsylvania, New York region, her name is Suze Hinton. She said to me, "Why don't you try live streaming? This concept of live coding." And it was under creative at the time. And she explained, hey, just get on and you work on an open source project or something. You answer questions and chat and you get into it. But you do all those things that you would be talking about and doing on a podcast, plus writing code, and you get the immediate interaction. And I liked the idea initially. I thought it was a little bit more of a stretch. And thinking about not having a producer or an editor, it scared me at first. So I took a weekend in November and just tried it out. It was a holiday weekend, the American Thanksgiving holiday. Let's give it a shot and see what happens. I had no production quality out there. My video from that is still here on YouTube. You can find that over on my channel if you want to laugh at something. And I went through and I think I had 3 viewers the whole time. And even though it was only 3 viewers, I fell in love with the medium, and it became something that I realized and understood I can encourage folks and get that immediate feedback. And the key thing for me in those initial streams that Suze communicated was using an open source project as the vehicle. Because not only then was I showing the code on screen, but when I would commit to GitHub, the viewers could pull down the source code, ask questions on issues or in chat, could publish pull requests. And when you get a pull request from somebody who's watching your stream during stream, such a huge bit of feedback that's encouraging and helps in a way that is very similar to working with a project team at whatever organization. So it felt amazing. And shortly after that, Twitch awarded me affiliate status in January 2018, and I was hooked. Oh my gosh, I got to keep doing this. This is great, and just had a blast with it.
So 5 years later, and obviously being very passionate about it, and I'm assuming you still are, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be doing it.
Oh yeah.
Would you say that it's something you'd be doing full time?
That's the $1 million question, right? Is this something?
Because for me, it's not whether you could financially, I'm sure you could. It's would the novelty of it just fade away because now you're doing it 5, 4, 6 hours a day?
So the flip side of would the novelty go away is I'm already creating content and meeting with people and talking to them, whether it's customers, it's product teams, and doing effectively the same things I would be doing on a live stream. So would I lose the novelty of it? I might go into different topics. I might go into different genres. I might not do just software. I might play games every now and again. Figure out ways to do more interview shows. I stopped doing interview shows 2-3 years ago. It's now something I rarely do, just because it's something that I wanted to focus on development. I wanted to focus on building something, and pivoting to building a project and having something that I can clearly say, okay, here's where we picked up from. Here's where we left off from last time, and moving forward with it. That more than just having a set of topics that I want to talk about, but having a project that I can point to and grow and folks can use. That's something that feeds my spirit in a way that allows me to continue to appreciate the novelty of working and in a live coding experience and answering questions and engaging folks, because there's always something different and new to do with the project. I look at another live coder, Lana Lux, on Twitch, doing an amazing job for 3, 4, 5 years. She's been building games with Unity and .NET, and she's about to publish the first game that she started building back in quarantine. There's a version out on Steam. She's got a Kickstarter going for it, and because she streams every day, and that's her full-time gig, and she's growing this game, and she's going to sell the game. She's got a fantastic community of viewers that engage and want to see the game succeed, want to see that product do well. She's in that very much that boat of being able to do things professionally for a long period of time. There's side things that you can do with that to definitely diversify the content you're building. Cut and create YouTube videos, push stuff over to TikTok, so that you do break up a little bit of the monotony. Having that dedicated project that's always different each day, and you're not doing the same thing all the time, I think makes it more interesting and would make it more compelling to do long term. Is that something I could do for a 10-year career? I don't know. I have family in going into college at this point that I'm helping pay for. You know what? We're not going to be considering that for a while. It's just not there. So
Yeah. Okay.
do you want to take a minute or two and answer some of the questions in chat?
Usually we don't do that unless it's directly relevant to what we're talking about now. So if anyone has a question if you spotted something that you want to address, by all means, do so. But generally for the podcast, because this is also an audio form later on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, unless it's directly applicable, we don't address it now.
I want to go to this one question from Triple E in chat asking, why doesn't Microsoft spend a little promotion money on supporting creators to make content for Azure DevOps? It's a good question, and quite frankly, I don't work with that group that is engaging folks to promote and encourage Azure DevOps. I have been engaging and promoting and helping get folks who make YouTube videos, Twitch content, TikTok videos. We've been finding influencers and encouraging and helping some of those folks create more content. We have a very vibrant MVP program that folks are getting material from us, and they're able to go and build ahead of time because we give them a little inside knowledge, build content, and be ready to write books, videos, blog content. And folks like Nick get access to some of that stuff and can do really cool things and provide feedback back to the team. And I know that's something the .NET team really likes hearing from folks like Nick, that helps us long term. So if the Azure DevOps folks aren't doing that, that's something that we can nudge and see if we can help out with. Absolutely.
Since you touched on that comment, because there's the end sentence that you left out potentially intentionally because it mentions a competitor. And of course, if you don't want to answer what I'm about to answer, it's absolutely fine. But the reason why Triple E mentions that is because AWS fully sponsored an introduction to AWS for C# developers course. So I can provide for free for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I'll be very open about my experience. AWS is extremely easy and open, and actually they proactively reach out. Influencers don't have to reach out to AWS. When I tried to use that as an opportunity to make a counter course or a pair course for Azure, same services, but the Azure services, it was extremely hard to, I was basically thrown around like a ping pong ball. No, don't deal with this. Go here, go here, go here. And at the end, people said, just message Scott Hanselman. And I'm not about to message Scott Hanselman to, like, I can, but I'm not going to message him to see who's going to sponsor an Azure. So I think there's a huge communication gap in Azure DevRel, in my opinion, in a way that it's not a problem with AWS. And so, maybe that's just feedback you can take with the team.
I very much appreciate that feedback. And something that I know folks have seen is that a lot of the people who were doing .NET Azure DevRel actually went and are doing that now for AWS. So we've had significant turnover there, and the folks who would be enabled and engaged and ready to do that aren't fully how do I want to say this? They aren't fully comfortable with that level of engagement yet. Absolutely, there's folks like myself, James Montemagno, John Galloway, that want to encourage influencers, want to help folks build great content to show off .NET, Visual Studio, Azure. Please reach out. Happy to talk to folks and get folks pointed in the right direction to continue to encourage and help people do more, develop better solutions. We're not going to say no, but I definitely hear there are marketing folks, there are sales folks that don't understand how to engage this community. So,
yeah, that's really good to hear. And yeah, I can reach out to one of those people. I'm pretty sure at least one of those names I did reach out, but we're not gonna go more in depth into that. Okay. You mentioned this sort of, I imagine it as like the core or the anchor point for your live stream, and that is like a long-term project. And in your case, that is Kliptok, which for those of you in chat, I'm gonna give a quick description. When you're live streaming on Twitch, and there's a highlight that you want to share to other people or just save, you can create what's called a clip, and that clip can be, from 3 to I don't know how many seconds it can be, but it's basically just a new object. Imagine it, which is an object in this array of minutes that you have, and you can then reshare it. But that's really only visible in that person's profile. So to find it, you have to be looking for it. It's not something you can really discover. And one of the biggest problems with Twitch is actually discoverability. If you're a small channel, it's impossible to grow. And any big creator on Twitch will tell you, if you want to build a Twitch presence, start on YouTube and then redirect those YouTube subscribers to Twitch, because YouTube does have an amazing algorithm. And what Jeff has done is he's built this project which sort of leverages the whole clip functionality on Twitch. And then with Microsoft, and not only Microsoft technology, because we've seen things like RavenDB, for example, you've built this platform to share and clips and make them discoverable, sort of boosting channels organically, which is a fantastic product, and that is built with Blazor, which makes you, at least in my eyes, the most visible Microsoft employee and the most visible Microsoft product, even though it's not a Microsoft product, but you know the way it comes across given you're an employee, using Blazor, because one of the biggest things I hear all the time is, if Blazor is so good, why is Microsoft not building Bing without, or Azure without it, or with it, sorry. So tell me a little bit about Kliptok. How did the idea come about, and how's your experience been for the past few years that you've been building this?
So you're absolutely right. Clips on Twitch, they're a discovery mechanism. They're that highlight, about a minute of video that you want to be able to share. You want to publish it on Twitter. You want to publish it out on Facebook. LinkedIn, do people publish short videos like that? I don't know. But it's a discovery mechanism. And what I was seeing back in 2020, when I first was thinking about the project, was what do I do with my clips? How do I publish them and get them somewhere so more folks can discover them? What I had seen, I run every now and again, I'll run theme months where I've got a type of technology that I'll focus on. And during one of my theme months in March, that I call Minimal March, I write all my .NET code at the command line. No editors allowed. So I did a couple clips where I showed how I set up .NET to run on a Chromebook. And in doing that on Twitch, grabbing those clips, I embedded those clips with instructions on my blog. And to your point, discoverability on Twitch comes from somewhere else. YouTube's a great mechanism for it. TikTok's a great mechanism for it. For our communities, for our developer communities, blogs and places where folks search for code are great places to discover our content. So embedding a clip there, or embedding a clip on GitHub, huge, easily the most viewed clips that I had at the point. I was like, oh my gosh, how do I get more of these out there somewhere? And another creator on Twitch, he's on YouTube and he bounces back and forth now, a guy named Harris Heller. Look at me, I'm dropping names like you're going out of style. It talked about, wouldn't it be great if we had Twitch clips in a TikTok-like format so you could go through them real quick? What a great idea. And I had heard rumors that Twitch had looked at something like that in the past, and it was quickly canned because very much the focus of the Twitch executives are live content. Everything's live, and you can see that in the culture and the way the product is developed. But how do we get this discoverability out there? And at that time, Azure Static Websites was coming online, and folks were talking about, hey, this is really cool. You can build a Blazor app that runs on WebAssembly and have your Azure functions kind of run next to it in the same app. And just like you said, I thought, we don't have a big sample application out there that folks can point to and say, that's made with Blazor. That's pretty cool. That's a thing that I can relate to. I can tell you that in the time since then, there are a number of other Microsoft products that are being built and will be deployed with Blazor that you won't even know are running with Blazor, but they're coming. And there are a number of internal sites that all use Blazor. We even have an internal Blazor interest group that meets on Teams and talks about ways that we can use Blazor throughout the company. All that said, what's the public-facing thing? So in thinking of, I want to build a project on stream that's going to last a long period of time. And I want to make my clips more discoverable, and I want to make Blazor a little bit more high profile. That's where Kliptok kind of came together. So it was mid-November. I said, let's take a 12-hour stream and 12 hours of live coding and streaming. That's a haul. That's a lot of time. let's build just an initial Blazor static website. I'm going to grab the IDs for a half dozen clips, and let's see if we can just get them to appear on screen TikTok-like fashion and be able to scroll through them. And setting some initial goals, some initial capabilities that I wanted to have, it worked out well. It was something that I found interest in. It delivered what I wanted, and iterating on that and taking the approach and talking to my management chain and saying, this is something that I'm building here. I want to maintain the IP for this. Even though it's going to demonstrate and show off all these Microsoft things, I'd like to maintain the IP. I'm going to use lots of Azure features so that you get both. I'm going to have lots of feedback on Blazor, lots of feedback on Azure and other .NET versions that come along. And I can talk more about that and what happened yesterday. It's been able to feed and get feedback into the Blazor team. I've had conversations with Steve Sanderson and Dan Roth about things that work well on Kliptok and things that don't work well that they hadn't considered because they're not building and seeing applications that are managing hundreds of gigs of data, pushing videos in front of folks, video players. How do we do that? How do I put that into a Maui app to make it into a mobile experience? And the conversations I've had now with the Maui team around some of those things have made the evolution of Kliptok over the last 2 years something that has become valuable and interesting to folks. I was at .NET Conf and producing. You may have seen me during .NET Conf. I was behind the window in studio and watching and moderating, and I had Kliptok up on a second screen there because as things were happening during .NET Conf, I would take a clip on Twitch and put it into a playlist on Kliptok. So there's a playlist there that you can go through and see .NET Conf highlights, and that was something that I was doing. Well, David Fowler walks off stage, and I'm tweaking something in code because something's not performing quite right, and we're in between segments, and he's looking at it and asking, what's this you're building? And I explain to him and give him the 2-minute pitch of what it is. And he got real interested in how I was using functions and caching and deploying and managing something that's not just another ASP.NET Core website that's a blog or a shopping cart app or one of these typical types of applications that folks see, but something that's, quite frankly, borderline social media. How do we do that? How do we support that scale and do some of the cool things with that? And it raises questions, and there's techniques and things that we learn from building something and maintaining something of size that as a community manager, I can spend my time doing and turn some of that experience into, just like I was saying earlier, into conference sessions, into blog posts that then other folks learn from and we can do cool things with. So it's been quite the experience, and drawing that separation has proven very valuable to not just the folks at Microsoft that I'm working with, but other folks that say, hey, I have a technology that I'd like you to show off. Can you try using Raven? What about, hey, we have these Telerik components for Blazor. You want to try using those, that we can probably save you a lot of time with that. Hey, I have a product that does transcription. There might be something cool you can do with that. And bringing all of that together and showing off some of those features and using them and integrating at scale like that has provided a lot of value for everybody involved.
The problem with good ideas that are, or good products that are parasitic in nature, in the sense that they depend on a shark, and you're sort of the fish around the shark that just helps.
Sure.
I don't know what's the actual biology analogy, but sort of get the point, is that the shark might eat you at the end of the day. And I was recently reading the open letter from Twitch for 2023. And at the bottom, they alluded that they're planning to use clips and sort of add similar functionality as Kliptok has
Mm-hmm.
built into Twitch, which would sort of make Kliptok obsolete. What do you think about this relationship, and what does that mean for Kliptok?
So I've been talking directly to Twitch about this product since even before I built it in 2020. They know I've been building it. I've watched Twitch staff come in and hang out in my stream and watch me build Kliptok. I'm fully aware that they are seeing what's happening and have been in no small part influenced by that. I've also seen that Kliptok has about 12 other competitors out there, 12 to 15 other competitors, depending on how you look at what value Kliptok delivers. I can tell you that most of these folks that are building what I'll term as competitors, they've made terrible architecture decisions. They've decided to build and do things that, quite frankly, led to the failure of their company. I'm talking about you, Hover GG. Where Kliptok is focused on not so much delivering videos, but delivering connections to videos, delivering content that makes folks more interested in other content. I've looked at other products that Twitch has built and delivered over the last 5 years. I've had a relationship with them. As a partnered streamer with them, I do get access to some of their planning, some of their folks, sooner than typical streamers or viewers. I've delivered presentations for Twitch. I've taught a workshop at TwitchCon. And I've got a very good relationship with their folks. They know that most of the folks in our communities, and I'm referring to Twitch streamer communities, not just developer communities, we don't like the products that they have brought forth to try and compete with other established vendors in the market that they've created. Great example of that is they built a charity subscription feature. So you can wire up and run charity-focused content on Twitch, connecting through Twitch and PayPal to be able to raise money for organizations. Fantastic idea. There's another vendor in the space called Tiltify. Tiltify has been around for a very long time. And Tiltify has been working very closely with some very, very large charity organizations. And what these folks have established in a relationship through Tiltify is a level of trust and a level of integration that Tiltify provides. Whether you're streaming on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, doesn't matter. Tiltify has provided a very trustworthy connection through to these organizations that, quite frankly, Twitch and their business partner PayPal does not deliver, does not encourage, does not put a brand, a face on things that folks can trust because of problems folks have had with PayPal in the past, problems folks have had with content and direction on Twitch. There's a trust there that isn't 100%. And quite frankly, folks that I speak to around a charity organization that I work with, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we're going to continue working with Tiltify because of that established relationship, because of that level of trust and integration that's already built. So when Twitch comes along and says, oh, we're going to add this other feature here so you can scroll through and watch clips inside your Twitch app, that's nice. Do you appreciate just how little people use the Twitch mobile app? Do you appreciate how little that Twitch mobile app is encouraging to folks to click through to other streams and how hard it is to get between those? Do they appreciate the amount of power that Twitch app brings, where folks don't stream using that app? They use other apps instead, like Streamlabs. They don't they don't appreciate that when you're using the Twitch app, your phone gets hot because it's not using battery and components effectively. Folks don't really trust their mobile experience right now. So Is Twitch coming into the space? Sure. Are they going to do well? I don't know. Does it affect me? Sure. They're never going to build the features that I have. They aren't. They just aren't. Would it be beneficial to them to partner with me? Absolutely.
Okay.
Have I discussed that with them? Them and several other organizations. And folks have said, you know what? We're not quite there with features yet. But if Twitch is moving into the space, okay, now there's something interesting to discuss. Now it gets a little bit more intriguing, and now some of those differentiator features that we've built on Kliptok become much more interesting.
You obviously don't have to answer this, but if Twitch came along and they said, you obviously have the know-how, you understand the community, you understand the platform, here's this bag, come over, lead the team who built this feature. And now you're no longer a Microsoft employee, you're a Twitch employee.
Mm-hmm.
I understand this is an extremely hard question to answer, so if you don't want to answer it, don't do that. But would you be even entertaining that idea, if that's something easier to answer?
My goal continues to be to encourage folks to learn, grow their careers, and do more. And that's something that I value very much with my time with Microsoft, and why I really enjoy running .NET Conf. If another organization offered to bring me over and continue to build Kliptok, and I can continue to achieve those goals, I think all of us in the tech industry, we work for money. We have family to take care of. We have homes to pay for. If somebody's going to offer me more money to do the same thing or more, it's going to be a hard decision to leave Microsoft and do that. I'm not going to say, yes, I'm absolutely going to do that, but I'm also not going to say no. It's going to be a tough decision for me to make because I do really enjoy what I do. If the price was right, absolutely, it wouldn't even be a thought. But right now, I don't know. There's things going on in the tech industry, a lot of uncertainty that I wouldn't want to be swept up in. I'm very comfortable where I am, and some folks say that comfort in your career is a bad thing. So I don't know. It would be a tough decision to make. I work with a fantastic group of folks. It would be a tough decision, and if that bag of money was the right size, Nick, I wouldn't say no.
Yeah,
so.
I appreciate the answer. Sometimes people ask me, you make YouTube videos, you have your courses, you have whatever, you run workshops. Would you ever work as a DevRel for a company?
Mm-hmm.
And like, well, I have the best of both worlds because I can choose who I work with. Like, I get tens of, maybe hundreds of emails a month to sponsor products. I work with companies. I'm very picky about it, of course, because I have to believe in the product to promote it. Sure. But if the price was right, sure, I would be open to getting hired by a company. So yeah, I appreciate the honesty on that.
And to be frank, that's exactly the question that I got when I decided to go work for Telerik. And when I left Telerik and I went to Microsoft, it was, you're a software developer now at company XYZ, and you're giving presentations at all these locations for free, whether it's a code camp or a small regional conference. How'd you like to get paid to do that? And at the time, I had two small kids, 3 and 5. You know what? It's going to increase my compensation. It's going to give me a little bit of security around that, and I get to do the things that I like. Sounded like a good match for me when I started. And then when the opportunity came along for me to join Microsoft, it was, you're doing all the things that we're doing at similar events, and you're doing it better than some of our folks. Would you be interested in joining and doing that? And when when one of the FANG companies comes to you, right, one of the top 10 tech companies in the world comes to you and says, "We'd like you to represent us," right? And I make no bones about it. I know in the back of my head, I represent a company valued at more than $1 trillion. Holy smokes. I'm a spokesperson for Microsoft. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. That's always in the back of my mind, and that's why, right? You hear me during this conversation. I pause and make sure I get things right in my head before I talk about it. But that's the top of the hill. That's the top of the mountain. Would I love to do like you're doing, be able to broadcast and set my own pace and take sponsors when I'd like to build and deliver content? Sure, absolutely. That would be so much fun. But I'm at a point in my life where there's a security that comes with where I am that I'm not prepared to give up. You know, I can create that content, and I can't do it as prolifically. Is that a word? Did I make that up? I think I made that up. But
Hey, I'm Greek. I don't know. Anything you say is right by me.
But I feel like there's always opportunities to create more live content, to turn some of that, summarize in a 5-10 minute video and pitch over to YouTube. I'm not going to be able to do it as quickly and regularly, and it's not the first thing on my agenda. But it's something when I want to, I can certainly put something together to deliver out there. But being hooked onto a company to do these things that we enjoy doing, engaging and talking to communities and helping folks, it's very comfortable when you have a family.
Yeah, I understand. Have you ever felt, and I'm sure you have at some level, but have you ever felt strongly limited as a developer, not so much as a live streamer or dev or whatever you want to call it, but as someone who writes code, by the fact that your options to technology are limited to a degree? In my experience, having worked extensively and at scale with both Azure and AWS, for example, not so much with GPC because nobody uses that, but with Azure and AWS, they very much are similar services having similar providers having similar services. But in some cases, one counterpart has one of the features I really wish the other one had, and eventually it might get it. It's not uncommon. Have you ever felt that you wanted to look at some piece of technology to integrate to Kliptok and you just couldn't because of the position you were? And how do you deal with that?
So, to be clear, I'm not limited in the technologies that I try and interact with. I'm limited in the technologies that I interact with in public. So, yes, there are competitors that I can't. I am required to not feature on live streams, blogs, these types of things. That's just the nature of the beast. You work for this company. We really don't want you promoting and talking about competitor X. And I'm very forward in saying it doesn't matter to me if you use one of Microsoft's competitors' products. I'd really like you to try ours and let us know what you think, why you don't like ours. And that's a perfectly valid discussion to have. But I try out and I will step into some of those other products now and again, try different programming languages, different services, different tools. I just don't share that as publicly on a live stream. Some of my colleagues have done that. They also have a little bit more gravitas in the space, and they can handle some of the pressure that comes from marketing folks.
That is hard to believe, to be honest. That last bit, because maybe you're playing too safe. I don't know.
No, some of my colleagues have written blog posts and things about some of the competitors' products. They have. And they received They had a talking to. There was a conversation that came down from the folks at Xbox about using Mixer, and I had to write and state a little bit about, here's what I like about Mixer, here's what I don't like about Mixer.
Interesting.
At the time when I parted using Mixer. So I feel comfortable talking about Mixer since that's been offline now for 2 years. It's a little bit further behind us. But when you do talk about larger companies that have a very large product portfolio, it helps everybody if you use and provide feedback about our own products, particularly in public. It's also good to know about the competitors' products as well, so that you can provide that feedback of, hey, I was able to do this on AWS, and it was real easy for me to use. And I couldn't do that on Azure. Maybe this is something we want to look at. And to have that insight is valuable. When I worked at Telerik, I regularly downloaded and tried other folks' component libraries, open source component libraries. Hey, we built feature XYZ. What do they have? What do these folks over there have? Is there something that we can make better? What's our competitive advantage? How do we do more with that? That's part of being a product manager and being able to give that insight in what's valuable and what isn't. So do I use those things? Absolutely. I check into them. I don't want to say regularly, but occasionally. But I'm not going to be out publicly saying, hey, look at what's so great about Lambda. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah.
What I will do is I will say, you know what, Azure Functions are really great for these reasons, and I'll focus on those reasons that I know Azure Functions does better than Lambda. I'm not somebody who's going to be negative publicly towards another product. I'm going to be positive and promote those things that our tools, technologies, and services do great. So
it is not uncommon watching you, however, and that's maybe not so common now, but probably 1 year ago, it was a pretty common thing where you try to integrate with some Azure service, and either documentation on the SDK would be lacking, or we're doing something else. The SDK would just be plainly bad. There would be like 2 SDKs, and which one should I use?
Yep.
And it was very hard for you, at least that's the way I perceived it, to contain yourself, because you come across as someone who's very passionate about technology being done right, and it's very hard to just openly criticize that. So how do you deal with that being live? Obviously, you're gonna go ahead and open an issue, or the common thing was, I'm gonna have a chat with the SDK team or whatever. I think it was along those lines. And that's, one of the great things about doing it on the wild, obviously. But I don't necessarily believe it has to come to a program manager coding live for those things to get better. There's 2 problems here. The first one is customers are not vocal enough.
Yes.
People should be, like, that should be the mentality that people have. If something is bad, raise it. Everything is in the open.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then consistency in documentation, which now it's way better than it was.
Yes.
But it's still not great. And that's not unique to Microsoft, by the way. That's on everyone. But with so many versions, so many .NET, so many, SDKs.
Yeah. So at the time, right, a year or 2 ago, I literally went to somebody in leadership on Azure and said, I cannot use your product on live streams and in live demos because it is XYZ. And message was heard loud and clear, and those folks got their stuff in line. Friends of mine that work on the SDK, friends that work on various tools and features around Azure, I had long conversations with them about, this doesn't work in the simple scenarios. How are you expecting this to be a thing? And going through and having that conversation at the point where the community-facing program managers are having to deal with customer questions and problems, is frustrating. Why don't you have these types of interactions before we get out? And forcing that discussion has dramatically improved their interactions, has dramatically improved the folks who are writing the documentation as well, and encouraging and pushing that. Getting the feedback buttons inside of Visual Studio and the Azure portal are huge, because folks on the program manager team, and I was one of the folks on that team, you have to respond to that within 48 hours. You have to triage it. You have to look at it. You have to do something with it within 48 business hours. So that gets those concerns in front of these folks' eyes very, very quickly and directly. So now they're able to address it and go through and say, okay, we've got to take care of these things. We've got a big problem, or right, whatever it is that they need to address. Coming back to, I hinted at yesterday. Yesterday I had a stream. I was going through and doing things with Azure Functions, and it was hard to use. There was so much that just didn't feel right for me as a .NET developer. And I had an hour-long conversation with the folks on the Azure Function team. I'm privileged that I get to do that. I get it. But it shouldn't have gotten to me. I raised to them, customers have been talking about this. Here's places where you can see customers talking about this. We need to do a better job partnering with that feedback and improving the product. And that was something that those program managers learned, that team now is acknowledged and said, you're right. We didn't do a good job with this. We're going to make it better. Here's what we're going to do over the next 2-3 months to get there. That's the type of thing that working with Kliptok, something at scale that's a public-facing product, that I let those folks have access to the source code. Go ahead, take a look. You can tinker around in there. I trust them, and we can talk about these, because it's not the typical, oh, here's a hello world service out there, or something that connects up to a service bus and does something very, very simple. No, these are longer scope functions that do very interesting, complex business logic, working with videos and audio files and all kinds of things. So it's more of a real test that they can interact with. Now, because I approached it as, let's partner with this and do more with this, I don't get to the point of being frustrated on stream, because they're hearing from me and they're engaging sooner on these types of things, which in turn makes the product better for all the customers out there.
I think the main problem with this is that you have a sort of hard dependency on someone who you shouldn't have to for quality control.
Totally agreed. Totally
because
agreed.
It's not your job to be the voice of the customer.
Is it?
I don't think it is. That's what I'm saying.
So this is the interesting bit of developer relations. Folks look at developer relations as, oh, I write blog posts, I generate videos, I go speak at conferences. That's talking at the customer. Got to make sure I put this right. That's talking at customers. And that's not what, in my experience, now doing developer relations of one sort or another for more than 10 years, that's not what developer relations is. It's a discussion. It's a two-way discussion. You are the the middle between marketing and product. You are customer relations. Your job is not just to teach and educate about, hey, here's new feature XYZ. I wrote a tutorial on this. I have a presentation to get you involved. I have a video that's going to show you in 5 minutes the real quick get started scenario. But it's also listening to that feedback, prioritizing it, talking to the customers, and going in some cases, speaking to customers and government organizations that want to use the product, getting their feedback and helping to make it clear for the program manager that's responsible for the product, who's also talking to customers, but you're helping to deliver that funnel of feedback so that they can make educated decisions about how to prioritize product direction, development, and new features they want to add. So it's really important to have that two-way discussion and to facilitate it for the folks who are making product decisions, whether it's the program manager in charge of the product, it's their manager that's in charge of a suite of products, or the vice president above them who has the vision for the product for the next 5 years.
I'm in line with that. I totally align what you're saying. My main point is you're live streaming this and you're using it after it's been out.
Yep.
Which sort of feels like old Microsoft. Old Microsoft anyway, would make a C# version without too much feedback from the community. C# 5 is out, 4 is out, dynamic is now a keyword. But here you go. And then the feedback would come in from users. While now with everything being in the open, I see this discussion on .NET and C#. I don't really see it so much on Azure. Maybe that's me. Admittedly, I'm using Azure less than I used. I still use Azure in some of my personal projects. But I think this discussion is way more active on .NET and C# than it is on Azure. And that's the main, I don't want to say issue I have, because I don't really have an issue with it, but that's what I observe.
So what you're seeing is the seams between divisions in Microsoft.
Right.
The developer tools division that manages Visual Studio, .NET SDKs, Python SDKs and tooling, Visual Studio Code, JavaScript and TypeScript tooling, the TypeScript language, csharp, and Azure DevOps is part of our charter as well. Those tools, those technologies, we have a very clear way that we want to engage with our customers, with our community, making all of Visual Studio Code and all of .NET open source, publishing and making the Python tools and TypeScript tools open source, huge steps to encouraging and engaging in those conversations. You're absolutely right. Azure products, mostly closed source. Some of the techniques, some of the things, they do open source. They release a Linux distribution that helps drive some of Azure. They release some of the underlying technologies that help Azure run well. And we publish benchmarks and things from DevDiv about how ASP.NET helps make Bing run well, showing how that works. But very much those services on Azure, they're closed source. Under the covers, once you get past, they're closed source. We're not really talking to folks about, how can we make these things technically better. We're talking to customers about features that we want to improve. And even then, the level of the customer that they're talking to is not the startup, is not the small organization that they're talking to regularly. They hear, and the folks that make a louder noise in the room are going to be those larger customers that want to do more with more Azure. So those are the folks that are having those discussions. You're not going to see the community level discussions about, hey, how can we make app service faster by engaging and tweaking the way that the operating system works. You're not. That's just not it. There's a competitive advantage that's inherent in Azure when we talk about AWS and GCP being used in the same space. And quite frankly, those folks want to get an advantage because right now, everybody's building the same things in the cloud services. AWS has a lead because they're doing feature X, and 6 months later, Azure has feature X, and 2-3 months after that, GCP has it. GCP adds Kubernetes, and all of a sudden, within a year, Azure and AWS have really great Kubernetes hosting. It's very much we're going to get 3 to 6 months lead time on the other two cloud services. We need to be quiet, focus, deliver, take advantage of that, and then we can see do more with it at that point. That's just typical business things that are going on. And yeah, it is old school Microsoft the way those things are working. But you also don't see those same discussions from the other cloud vendors. You don't see AWS and GCP out there asking, hey, what would you like us to do with our website hosting? You don't see that technical discussion. You'll see customer-oriented discussions around, hey, wouldn't it be great to add feature X?
Interestingly enough, I think AWS recently published a GitHub issue where they want to basically standardize the way messages on their messaging services are consumed. So standardize the API and then allow everything to be sort of plug and play. Things that Mass Transit or N Service Bus has been doing for a long time. And they very much are open to feedback. But this is not an AWS versus Azure. I don't want to be one anyway. I want to take a step back and go back to the streaming. And I want to ask you, obviously now you're the executive producer of .NET Conf. And again, congratulations on the release and how that was run. It was pretty smooth. I was actually watching it live while it was playing. I wasn't speaking at it. And I had quite a few viewers actually, and it was a very nice discussion in chat as things were going on screen and we're talking about it. And maybe in the future we can have a partnership where I can actually stream it, because I didn't have permission. I didn't want to do that as a viewer, but I know some other channels did. I'm not sure they had permissions to do that, but anyway.
Nobody has permission.
Yeah. I didn't want to risk it, so I didn't stream it. I was just said, if you want, open it in another screen and we can have a discussion. And it was pretty weird for chat and me to see in the first hour, I want to say, or 2 hours, a lot of no code or low code solutions, and then heavy Azure usage on an event called .NET Conf. And somehow, obviously, you have to pay the bill because .NET in itself doesn't really, from what I understand, make money. Things around it do. But there was quite a bit of negativity coming out of that, and I want to make it very visible to you because it just felt like it was an event for people who are passionate about .NET, but it focused on things that are not directly .NET on the first 2 hours. The sentiment wasn't you should not talk about those things at all. It's let's start with the highlights and then push it back. So what do you think about that?
I think folks don't really. I think there's a dramatic negative tone from the .NET community towards the ideas of minimal API and the low-code approach to building and starting websites. Looking at the agenda for .NET Conf, the first 2 hours were all about the web. They were all about building with Blazor, building with minimal APIs, building high-performance services, and then that run in the cloud, and then handing off to cloud topics and showing, well, if you're using .NET, and one of the big themes for .NET 7 is high performance, being able to do more with less code, marrying that and bringing that into and doing a cloud discussion after talking about minimal APIs, new Blazor features, was a natural transition. Going from web content to then talking about desktop apps or Maui apps, when we had just done a full 8-hour event about .NET Maui, not 3 months prior, was giving too much visibility to Maui in day one when it already had a full day. And the change between the Maui release in August and November wasn't as significant as some of these other features and capabilities that we did want to highlight. We definitely got into Maui and got into building other native apps later in the day. I look at this in the mindset of nobody's ever going to be 100% happy with the content that we present and dig into. Presenting and delivering content on day one, we want to make sure that we grab and make sure and get the folks who are new to .NET, who are trying this out and want to get involved. I want to get some of those folks involved, interested in trying some of the things that are interesting, that are valuable to them and similar to what they're already using. Get them involved sooner than later. Get them interested. The folks that want to learn about building mobile apps, native apps, that want to get into some of the other stories, we got to that later in the day. We got to showing and interacting with other products and deep into the language in day two by setting up and structuring these blocks of content where, you know what, we put 2 hours together right up front about web because we know most of the folks that want to use .NET that are tuned into .NET Conf want to learn about web technologies. Here it is. The partner technology to go with that, cloud. And we can't talk about .NET and all the places you can use .NET without talking about cloud services, without talking about Visual Studio, talking about PowerApps at some level and different ways to integrate. Yeah, there's folks that would rather us start off and jump right into .NET MAUI. There are. We did a full day of that three months prior. So folks that are upset that we didn't dive back in and talk about Windows native apps, we got to it. It wasn't something that was a big bang topic. It wasn't one of the pillars of the release that was coming out. So it wasn't the focus that we wanted to land on. And I'm okay with pushing that later in the event. But if the folks that don't like minimal APIs and the smaller approach, the low code approach to writing very productive .NET content, they're not the folks that I'm trying to attract and start using .NET. You can continue writing code the exact same way that you have been. No change to that whatsoever. But folks that are looking at Node and Python and want to consider working with .NET, I'm going to put content in front of them that is attractive to them, that's similar to the way that they program, so that maybe they get interested and stick around a little bit.
So, at least in my chat, and that's probably because I've been a very vocal advocate of that not low code, but minimal API approach. Everyone was absolutely happy with not saying MAUI. I don't talk about it, and basically they just switched it off when MAUI came about. Everyone was very happy with the web. The biggest issue and the negativity peaked at PowerApps by far, because the sentiment was, who cares? Who cares as a .NET developer? Even if you're doing Python or Node, who wants to jump to PowerApps because you're doing JavaScript or Python? It's not really, who are you trying to win here? That was the sentiment. Minimal APIs, maybe I've been very blessed with being on board from the very beginning and I have cultivated that idea. But if you want to get new developers, and if this event is really for new developers and not existing ones primarily, then is that what you want to make them think .NET is? And low code, no code, PowerApps, Azure only service? That's what doesn't hit with me.
So we didn't get to PowerApps till middle of day two. And the idea there is when we want to promote and talk about PowerApps, is that there is a very significant PowerApps community out there. It is significant in enterprises and in organizations where people want to enable that citizen developer, that person who isn't writing as much code. So how do we bring those folks into the discussion so that they appreciate ways that they can interact with .NET services, building and running and using .NET capabilities with their PowerApps that they haven't seen yet? So there's a huge volume of content across many, many different Microsoft technologies and external to Microsoft technologies that we want to be able to tell the whole story about. So yeah, there's going to be folks that they don't want to hear about PowerApps. They think it's not worth it to hear about that during a .NET event. I appreciate that. I understand that. But there's also folks that do want to build apps with teams and use .NET to do that. How do we do that? How do we get started? So I want to include that in the story that we're trying to tell about the whole collection of things that .NET does. If folks want to come back and say, well, you didn't cover enough IoT on this, okay, that's a valid criticism. But saying that your folks are not interested in this part and it shouldn't be part of an event because they're not interested in it is being blind to the entire .NET community. And we need to appreciate that the .NET community builds things from 64 kilobytes to 64 terabytes and everything in between. And to that end, everybody has a piece of the pie that we want to make sure that they can try out.
Okay, that does make sense. I just wanted to make sure I got my facts right, so I just quickly opened the .NET Conf first on my second screen. And yeah, PowerApps were actually shown for the better part of 5 to, I don't want to go all the way to the end, but I think 5 to 10 minutes in the first hour of the event.
Sure. They were in the keynote.
Yeah,
Yep.
they were in the keynote. So just wanted to make sure I didn't mix up the dates. And
Totally
that
cool.
was where that was the whole discussion started.
And what's interesting about building keynotes for large events, and I'm not talking about just .NET Conf, but when you think about build, you think about, think about Apple's keynote events, right? The large majority of viewers, including the press, are watching the keynote and the keynote only, and that's it. So it's important to cover things in that keynote that the casual viewer is going to appreciate. So you need to hit the widest audience possible. And there's things that aren't going to be deep topics that we're going to get into during the event, or we've got pre-recorded content to support, or even just written content to support, because it's not a key thing that we want to deliver during the event. But the press needs to hear it. I hate saying that, but the press needs to hear it. The marketing value of a keynote is huge. And when we plan keynotes, we need to make sure, we land that content properly so that everybody gets their piece of the pie. Because, let's be frank, it's marketing folks and marketing organizations that pay for events. It's not product organizations. So we need to make sure that we convey that message to all the products that need to be supported. Folks not appreciating and saying, this is stupid, I don't want to hear about this in the keynote. Yeah, message heard. I get it. I totally get it. But I also understand that while one group of folks is saying, I don't want to hear about PowerApps in the keynote, there's another group of folks that are saying, I don't want to hear about web apps during the keynote as well. So
yeah,
it's not a winning scenario. So you're always going to have some folks that are saying, I didn't really want to see this.
Okay. Yep. Totally understandable. I missed a question. Oh, here we go. So Layla from the Layla Codejit channel, Layla
Never
Porter.
heard of her. Who?
Yeah,
Who?
there's no way you've ever heard of her, and she will be a guest on the podcast at some point. But she asked, what ideas does Jeff have for bringing new devs to the community? He's mentioned talking about it all, but how would you make sure that people hear? The $1 million question. How do we get people in?
How do we get people in? It's my belief we've got to start earlier. It's my belief that, and I'm not divulging any secrets here. It's my belief that since 2002, when Microsoft .NET was initially released, that the .NET technologies were hidden behind a giant paywall, a box called Visual Studio .NET. And the only way to get it was to shell out $500, $1,000, $1,500 to get access to that. And quite frankly, colleges, universities, high schools, educational organizations, they weren't going to ask students to go out and spend that kind of money to get .NET. So there's a generation that just didn't have access to this because, quite frankly, there was a large gate preventing them from entering. Moving .NET to the open source model, it was moved initially as part of the concessions with the SEC that Microsoft had back in 2002, 2003, was open source. You could get the source code, but you weren't allowed to touch it. You weren't allowed to recompile it and do anything with it. But again, in 2008, 2012, and especially in 2014, 2015 with .NET Core being released, the move to very open source, very accessible, free for anybody to build and work with was a gigantic step in that direction to make it more accessible for everybody to use. But how do we make that more accessible for everybody, including training materials, including opportunities to learn and build all the cool things that we can do with C#, with VB, with F#? It's my belief that we need to make more educational material for folks that are in educational organizations. How do we do that? How do we make this accessible to those folks when you can sit down and use VS Code or Notepad or Vim to build and deliver content? I look at, I'm going to pause for a second there. There are schools out there that don't want kids using VS Code. They don't want them using it because, there you go,
What?
Nick. That's exactly my reaction.
I've
Let me tell
never
you a
heard
little
of
story.
this.
Chat room gather round. Wait till you hear this. My daughters for a while, 2017, 2018, 2019, were going to a cyber school. They were just like Dad. They were taking school at home, communicating over webcam with their teachers. It was a great experience. It really set them up well for when quarantine hit and everybody's got to be at home and learning. They were already set up. They already knew how to do that. But as part of that, my older daughter had a class on computer. Hey, we're going to have a computer programming class. That's great. Here's a 6th grade class that's going to learn all about computer programming. And they were using, they were building little HTML pages and delivering and writing simple web pages. Fantastic. I love hearing that. Kids building web pages and putting, they take a picture of your pet dog or cat and put their name on the page. Simple things to do, right? Those first steps. And my daughter's writing this code using, she's on her Mac and yes, my daughter has a Mac. And she's typing it in the text editor there. And you know what? She says, Dad, this is a pain in the neck. I don't enjoy doing this. Is there a better way to write this? I'm really not enjoying writing web code. And I said, wait till you see what Dad's team works on. We built a thing called Visual Studio Code. Oh, let me take a look at that. So we install Visual Studio Code and all the things that we as developers love and enjoy about our tools, right? Tag matching, autocomplete of tags, formatting things nicely. She wrote with Visual Studio Code and delivered a web page that looked, for a 6th grader, first time writing a web page, looked fine. And the teacher was so mad. You're cheating. What? Because she was getting autocomplete. She was getting IntelliSense help. Because when you type an attribute that doesn't belong on a table tag or on a bold tag, it would give you the red underline. That doesn't work here. Or it would give you a hint to help with colors. That's not how you spell papaya whip. That's cheating. It's my belief students should have access to these things. It's my belief that we can do more with that. It's my belief that there's a magic to writing software that we can all share and experience and do more with. And live streaming, producing code and content and making other folks more productive. It gives me, my gosh, it gives me spoons. It makes me feel so good. How can we do that for kids? So, Nick, I want to share with you, I've been doing a lot of work with the Raspberry Pi Foundation for years and years now, donating money to them and helping them with their Coder Dojo platform and building projects and tools to help kids learn more about technology. How can we get .NET into their hands? I want to get .NET easy to run on a Raspberry Pi with VS Code and little training materials that can go out there that are easy for folks to learn about that. I wrote a tutorial, some folks may have seen this, that shows folks, here's how to build a Connect 4 game using Blazor in your browser. Simple, cool. That's something fun to do. We can put that in the hands of kids and other similar things so that they can have fun and learn and do more with that. I want to raise more money for folks like the Raspberry Pi Foundation and help with Microsoft deliver content that folks like Raspberry Pi Foundation or schools or educational groups can do more with to help out and grow that next generation of developers, because the gates are open. And I use that term liberally. The gates are open that were closed for the initial 10 years of .NET. Let's get more folks in. Let's make it easy for folks to do this by enabling folks who are doing things like PowerApps and Teams integrations to use a little bit of .NET. Now we've got folks learning and building for the next generation of technology.
The problem with that, even though that's one of the things that I think each language should do or should be doing, that is a long-term investment, and that can take 5 to 10 years to manifest to something that can actually return. In that meantime, languages suffer from this interesting catch-22, which is the less people using a language, the less people are likely to use a language. And the more people are using a language, the more people will use a language, because people want to feel like they belong. So obviously, features like minimal APIs, for example, are a great approach to getting those Python or JavaScript developers to using the language, and that's great. But you sort of have to want to transfer over, and it's not something you can force on anyone.
No.
So the way I think about this, especially as a content creator speaking with thousands of people, is the only real entry point realistically that C# actually has as a language, and by entry point I mean sort of a funnel for developers, is not something that Microsoft owns. It is Unity. It's not minimal APIs, it's not ASP.NET Core. It probably might be a long time before it is any of those things. So what happens when Unity says, you know what, we're gonna go with Rust, or we're gonna go with Go for the next version, which is very unlikely. But at that point, I'd be very scared about C#. Because the approach now is someone makes a game, because it's very easy to make a game with C#. You search how to do this with C#. Now, Unity code is horrible, and I've tried to code something in Unity, and it brought the worst Nick developer out of me from all those years back. But at least it can get people interested. And when they say, oh, I now need a real-time connection to my game, or I need an API for my game, then they can make the jump. Because they can leverage what they have. But if that goes away, and with XNA now being dead as well, how are we guaranteeing that this avenue just won't close? Is that then Microsoft's responsibility to step in and buy Unity just to keep the language there? What are your thoughts on this?
So I can't speak directly towards it. I don't know the details, but there was there have been collaborations. There have been business dealings with the Unity organization that Microsoft has closed, and folks can look up the press releases about that. I don't know the specific details about that, but there is a strong collaboration with the Unity organization, and there are folks on the .NET team that work with them to help ensure that Unity benefits from the investments in the C# programming language, like you're saying, and .NET Core, .NET 6, .NET 7, and they end up with games that run faster in the Unity game engine. You're right. It's a fantastic avenue for folks to get involved and try out .NET and build things. And even throwing back to my topic about Raspberry Pi, folks in the Raspberry Pi organization have Unity running on Raspberry Pi devices. So you're right, a great avenue for folks to come in and try that out. I also look at how ASP.NET Core is among the fastest frameworks for building server-side web content. The web's not going away. It's been around 25 plus years, 30 years. That's not going away. That's very much someplace where we're going to be able to hang our hat that folks are building and delivering content with that for a very long time. A lot of the optimizations that have gone into ASP.NET Core have come from Microsoft's own first-party websites. I mentioned Bing earlier. A lot of features go into ASP.NET Core because it supports Bing. And then you can take advantage of using that with building your own websites. So at the very least, there is a very strong first-party ecosystem of Microsoft tools, products, applications that run in Windows, run on Mac, run on Linux that are built with .NET. So if the entire .NET ecosystem were to say, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to go and jump on Rust or Go, okay, those languages have their advantages. They also have their disadvantages. And I've heard within the last few days from organizations that said, you know what, .NET isn't appealing to me anymore. I want to go to something that all the developers are talking about. Let's rewrite and move the organization to Go. And they went over to Go. And it was really hard to build apps the same way that they were building with .NET. They weren't as productive. And bringing in folks who were productive and at that high level that they needed with Go, they just weren't out there. The ecosystem isn't as rich for those technologies. And that's kind of a keeping up with the Joneses problem, where they're not there. .NET's been around for 20 years, coming up on 25 years. And I can't believe I just said that. And there's a massive install base of this that, just like Java, just like C++, it's not going to go away. COBOL went away. Fortran went away. It's out there. People aren't really building new things with those. But there are regular investments into .NET to continue making it faster, better, more capabilities for building apps. My gosh, I'm building my first mobile app with .NET MAUI, and it's been something that I would have never considered if I had to write it with Java or with Swift or Objective-C. But because it's in a technology that I'm really good at, having that portability of my skills is something that a lot of these other technologies don't have, at least at the productive level that we do with .NET. That's something that organizations, customers of Microsoft that do use .NET realize and appreciate, that they do have that portability. Absolutely, there are amazing things you can build with Go and Rust. Not knocking them at all. They've built some really cool things, system level capabilities and technologies, Docker and various database technologies. Really cool stuff. Never gonna knock that stuff. Congratulations. That's really cool stuff that the web is built on, that the internet is built on. But you know what? When I'm building a website, I don't want to use Go and have to pass around pointers to objects and things. Those are things I don't want to have to think about. Using a higher level language like C#, Java, JavaScript makes me more productive at the end of the day. So there's a tool for everything, and not every tool is right for all the things. So if I can show kids that they can build websites, that they can build games with Unity, that they can do cool things to interact with their YouTube channels, with their Twitch channels, fantastic. I'm going to encourage that and hopefully light up that magic in their head, behind their eyes, so they get excited about things. So I think there's big opportunities there. And like you said, it is a long-term investment. It's a investment that Apple's been very good at for dozens and dozens of years, helping and fostering schools and educational institutions, making it easy to get Apple devices. But on the other hand, we need to get back in that game too.
Yep. Well, is there a question in chat that you saw that you want to address? And I'm also conscious we're reaching the 2-hour mark, so
I'm good for a little bit here.
Perfect.
If anybody, if you want to keep going for a little bit.
No, of course.
Somebody was asking what my first programming language was. Just like Plague Heart, my first programming language was Commodore 64 Basic. I have a blog post on my blog about how I sat around the dining room table with my father, who was a Unix administrator, IBM AIX at the time. And he knew BASIC from programming in college, and he was teaching. Here, I'm his 4-year-old son, and he's teaching me how to write Hello World with Commodore 64 Basic using the family Commodore 64 on the dining room table. And it was such a rush that 40 years later, I got to write the blog post announcing that Visual Basic was going Visual Basic, the language that Gates brought forth, that was being brought to and would work on AIX. To bring that full circle from my dad taught me this back then, and get to call my dad, hey Dad, we just made Visual Basic work on Unix machines now with .NET. That was something that was huge for me, and I will never forget. And being able to point back at Basic as kind of where I started from, it's something that I very much appreciate, and I want my kids to have that feeling of excitement with whatever their career might be, that they get to do something that evolves over time, that they can call back to mom and dad and brag about. So
yeah, I'm a bit on the fence of the kids thing, but if I do have them, the moment they can talk, let's talk about pointers.
It's kids get interesting.
Yeah.
Decision making changes dramatically once kids enter the picture.
Yeah, I really want to see how my schedule will be affected as well. It's an interesting dynamic.
Where we might have been staying up and working on a cool passion project, hobby project till 2-3 in the morning. You're not doing that because at 2-3 in the morning, somebody needs to be fed. Once a week streams, well, there's ways to work around that. There's ways to make that work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I missed it. I should have pinned it. There was a question I wanted to. What is the next theme now for February? Obviously, new month.
You know what? Stream? I haven't been. For my stream, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you were something else.
Yeah.
I'm going through and finishing a bit of SQL Server migration. I'm migrating from RavenDB back to SQL Server running on Azure. And quite frankly, the folks from the SQL Server team reached out to me because they had seen me working on Kliptok, and I had talked to some folks at a conference that I spoke at in December, and they said, you got to check out what we're doing over here. There's some things that we think you're going to find really interesting. And I took the Pepsi challenge. I spent a day or two and migrated some code and looked at how it ran and went through and gave them some feedback on some things that turned me off when I had evaluated SQL Server in the past. And I learned some things that really changed my mind about how I could work with SQL Server. And spending a year and a half working in a NoSQL database really changed my approach to working with relational data. I'm not ingrained in the third normal form approach to writing and reading data from a database. Let's denormalize a little bit more, and there's some interesting things, performance improvements that we see because of that. So I'm going to be finishing that migration at the beginning of February. I have other features that I want to add around artificial intelligence. Good example. Folks on YouTube and Twitch post things that like to skirt the lines, that like to go right up to that borderline of here's something that is appropriate for families to be able to see, safe for work, right? You know where I'm saying this.
I think Twitch is way more of a violator of that, especially with some categories.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. And Twitch has some rules around those categories.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that Kliptok didn't have that type of first experience for folks. You tune in and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I don't want to be seeing that. And building a website that is going to serve folks, folks that are all over the world, we need to be able to control that a little bit for folks that don't want to see that. So I wrote some functionality last month that would bounce some of those images, those thumbnail images, off of an Azure service that would identify racy, adult, or gory content. Okay. So I drew a line. If something is more than 90% confident that it's racy, adult, or gory, we're going to blur that by default. And adding in just that little bit of artificial intelligence helps to curb and make the content a little bit more acceptable to folks around the world. I want to continue to drive that feature so that folks can tune up and down. You know what? I'm okay seeing a little bit of that, but you know what? Let's not let everything through. There's a level where I don't want to see that, but stuff that you have lower confidence of, that's okay. I don't mind seeing some of that come through. That type of control and interaction, that's types of things that I want to build. I feel that bringing more artificial intelligence into our applications, you mentioned ChatGPT earlier, the cool things that we can do with that, how does that affect and help our other applications? There's applications of that could be very interesting in the scope of my application of Kliptok. So let's explore that. Let's take a look at what we can do with that. Figure out what other insights we can generate using AI technologies by analyzing clips that are created, how folks interact with those clips, and let's make those available, maybe even monetize, so that folks can learn more about how to be a better streamer, how to generate content that folks are interested in from their videos. So that's what I'm looking at over the next month or two.
How come you're migrating from RavenDB? Because I've been approached by, I think it's CTO, but also CEO. I can't remember his name, to use it. And it's something I've actually used and evaluated in the past, and it was just not cutting it for what I needed. And services like Cosmos and Dynamo were fine, or even Couchbase at the time. What can SQL Server now do that you didn't have before, and now you're migrating away from RavenDB?
So Raven has a really great capability to build and manage its own indexes for you. As you start to work with the data in a NoSQL structure, it'll identify, here's indexes that you're looking for, and it'll build those on the fly for you. When you're building an application that folks are interacting with and stepping away from, and the data is at rest for a long period of time with a lot of reads and not as many writes, Raven is amazing. Because every time you write, it has to recalculate those indexes, lay them out appropriately on disk, and be able to interact with them. And for those types of applications, it's fantastic. What I'm running into with Kliptok is I'm writing data about clips that are being created. We created more than 2 million clips in the month of January in the RavenDB database. Every time a clip is created, it's writing that data to disk. Not only does it write that data to disk, but 40 other indexes wake up, recalculate, and write that data to disk. Those disks end up spinning fast and hot. And quite frankly, I'm blowing right through my I/O allocation. There's times where Kliptok doesn't respond because the disk isn't allowed to spin anymore. That's a problem. So I introduce caching algorithms and mechanisms, places to put data so that it isn't hitting that disk when you first visit. Okay. But I'm also finding that the pre-calculations and ways that I was laying out data so that it was denormalized and ready for me to interact with, that works fantastic in a NoSQL environment, is now available over in SQL Server. Things like JSON columns, being able to interact with, query that data, flatten that data so that I have a user-defined function that will query data, flatten out a JSON column, and allow me to interact with that in a relational way to output reports or bring it back with Entity Framework and paint it on screen. Runs very, very fast. Runs without those limitations of I/O. And even when I do bounce up against my I/O thresholds, the service gives me a little bit more capability there before it completely shuts me off and doesn't respond at all.
Is that not a thing on RavenDB?
So
that buffer?
That there, because of how the Kliptok app writes to disk every minute with hundreds of new clips, it allows those writes to happen. But because the indexes rebuild, it effectively blocks requests because the index is still rebuilding. If I wasn't writing that volume of data, and I'm talking about writing 2 gigs of data, 2 gigs of clip data each month, that's a lot of data that it's writing. And the indexes rebuilding and growing are another gig or 2 each month. That's a lot that's being rebuilt and running. And Raven is handling it. And I can absolutely pay for it and grow and take more service, to build more, buy more cloud service to be able to do that. Financially, I can't.
Yeah.
I just can't. There's a budget that Fritz can pay for his database. I've hit that budget.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think the cloud vendors, and I'm not going to touch Raven or AWS or Azure. I think all the cloud vendors do a poor job of in explaining what the grow up story is. I'm starting on service X and I need to do more. I need to grow up. I've got more traffic. Well, you can buy more X, but maybe you want to migrate to Y and start using an alternate architecture to do more of those things. I'm on queues in Azure Storage queues. Maybe you want to grow up and use Service Bus now or Event Grid. And here's what can help you make those decisions to do that grow up story to these other architectures. That's valuable for me as somebody who's building an application to have that insight that's being shown to me, not just by a little bit of documentation, but by an existing application that's growing and going through that process, and sharing that experience with how Kliptok is growing has been terrific.
Yeah, having a real project for those things can really show you how the services scale. I've been lucky to have worked with both Cosmos DB and again DynamoDB later, writing gigabytes of data a day, not even a month. Probably the biggest DynamoDB, which is the counterpart of Cosmos DB in AWS, that they've managed was like 1.7 terabytes. It was a lot. It was thousands of requests per second.
Oh, yeah.
And thankfully, you have features to deal with that sort of scale. And I'm pretty sure actually Raven has this feature as well, where as things happen, you can listen to those as a queue and then act on it. I don't know if it is a feature. Maybe I'm thinking a different database. But on Dynamo and Cosmos as well. In Cosmos, it's called the change feed. You can have a Lambda listening for changes in Cosmos DB. I say Lambda, Azure function, listening for changes in Cosmos DB, and then process that as sort of an eventing mechanism, and then put it into a database, optimize it into a Redis cache or rehydrate a cache, and so on. It sort of works like Kafka to a degree, a log structure.
Sure.
And you can eliminate all of the services around it. So you can optimize for search if someone wants to be very flexible with text, which is one of the biggest pain points, especially with the clip. Is it called transcribing, where you listen to the text and you save the text so you can search for it?
Yep, I transcribe not all of them, but a good number of clips.
Yeah. Those types of things, you would probably optimize to Azure Search or Elasticsearch, whatever you choose.
Absolutely.
To use.
Search on, when you're searching millions of documents on Azure Cognitive Search or Elasticsearch, that starts to get expensive. But full text search in SQL Server is good enough.
Yep.
So let's use that. Full text search in RavenDB is great. Let's use that.
And one of the things that I don't know if the viewers know, and correct me if I'm wrong, for anything Kliptok specific, you're paying out of pocket. You're not sponsored by Azure. I mean, do you get credits by Azure to host it in Azure?
No.
No, you don't. Okay, but
I
a company like
I pay for all of the Azure services. I pay for all the Raven services. I do have sponsors that have paid for consideration that have helped fund that, but I pay for all of that. And when at the end of the month, when the bill comes in, Fritz starts making decisions. Do we continue at this in this service, or do we need to move somewhere else? And Nick, when the bill came in November, not only did Fritz look at that and go, ooh, but Mrs. C# Fritz looked at that and said, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah. That's why I want to mention is because you don't really make decisions, nilly-willy. Oh, I have an infinite budget from Azure, and I can choose anything and not be good at scaling it. Like, you have to be optimal with your architecture, with your design, and your architecture choices. And the great thing is you show difficult things like migrations and explain why you're doing what you're doing. So No, it's a great source of information on how to use the platform, and obviously sponsors are always nice.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's not something that you get an unlimited budget for. And in fact, you don't get any budget for.
The side benefit of that also is now I don't have folks at Microsoft that are able to say, well, wait a sec, I gave you a little bit of money so that you could use X. You need to use X. No, I can push back and say, this doesn't suit my needs, and here's why. They can take that and use that information to make the product better, change some of their marketing. So there's features and things that are going to be coming with SQL Server over the next year that I'm now privy to, and I'm very privileged to be able to have access to that, but I now can look at and see, and I can discuss with them, and they understand now my perspective as small company that is trying to use their product, and they can do more with, because there is no filter between me and them. We work for the same company.
Yeah, and to address a question in the chat, well, actually, it's not a question, it's a statement. Yum Rocks One says that I'm surprised Azure doesn't throw credits at him. I'm assuming this is intentional, so you don't have to worry about who owns the IP. Yes. And yeah, so it's a decision that you've made. I'm sure they'd love to sponsor you, but in my opinion, it's a smart thing to not accept and just keep rolling on your own. You don't know what that could be, and you don't want to have any questions later down the road. Who's that?
Exactly, right. I've had that discussion with a vice president, and we have a common understanding of this, and it's well documented. Here's where things start. Here's where they stop, and I pick up the bill for that. That's fine. We've got a very clear delineation between responsibilities. That said, though, I'm happy to listen to an Azure group that says, hey, why don't you try my new feature XYZ? How can this help? And not a problem listening to that and discussing it, because that helps everybody, which at the end of the day is my job.
Yeah. And then another thing I want to touch on is cloud vendors need a I don't want to spend more than X setting, especially when playing around. All cloud vendors have a free tier, and they're very clear about the limits of that free tier. And all of them have a budgeting tool as well, where you can say, that's how much I want to spend. I'm assuming all of them, I'm generalizing, but I know AWS does have the budget feature. And I'm pretty sure Azure with Azure Monitor has a similar feature as well, which you can set a limit and say, I don't want to spend more than that.
I turned off my budget for a few months and made a mistake in configuration of a service, and another time when Mrs. C# Fritz came.
Oh no!
What the hell did you do? Yeah. I worked that out, and lesson learned and documented. And the product team looked at it and said, "There's no problem with this." They learned quickly there's a problem, and I believe they've since addressed that.
Yeah, so. use the budgeting features. Like, you can go bankrupt if you don't careful.
Absolutely. I look at the budget on my Azure services weekly, and I'm turning off and moving things.
Do you have alerts for when things go wrong, or when things reach a limit to be like, oh, this is oddly higher this month? Go on and take action. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, and that's where I started to get to with Raven, and how do I fix this? What's my next step? And I started searching for alternatives. Yep. So, and it's not a knock on Raven at all. It's my data has grown and is behaving in a way that isn't optimal for their database service, and that's okay. Yep. Like we said earlier about .NET and Rust and Go, different tools for different problems.
And not everyone has the same needs or the same budget. So like there's a place and a time for everything. The biggest issue I have with technologies like Raven, personally, is that people try to push them to me as if I should care because it's written in C# and .NET. And the truth is, I could not give a about what it's written in. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. I need a product. Do I know what MariaDB or Postgres is written in? Probably C, but I don't care. That's not a selling point. I've used C# specific technologies like Event Store, and they were at scale. They were terrible, and we had to move away. So the language itself is not a selling point to me, unless it's something like, I don't know, Fortran, which I run away. I don't know.
I had a problem trying to run Hugo, the static website generator.
Yeah, the Go one, right?
Is it?
I think it's Go.
Okay. But and there were things that I was looking into, like, why isn't this working? Why what's so difficult about this? What am I not doing right? And I realized as I was digging more and more into the source code, it was like, I can do this by just rendering Markdown using a MarkDig plugin with C#. And I started writing my own blog rendering command line tool with C# just because I knew the technologies and I could write something in an hour or two that would take my Markdown, generate HTML. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
And it grew and grew and grew. And now I've got a tool that's open source out there that it has its own embedded web server, and I can write everything in a graphical user interface. It's fun to build. I didn't need to do it. I didn't need to know what technology it was in. But to your point, I just needed a program to generate a static website. And it was easier for me to write something in C#. If somebody else takes advantage of it, great. If not, that's okay too. It solved my problem.
Awesome. Well, on that note, and as we're reaching we passed the 2-hour mark by like 15 minutes.
It's okay.
If you want to plug in anything about what you do, where people can find you, etc., now it's the time to do it. So let chat know what's up.
All right. So the plugs moment. So you can find me on Twitch. You can find me Tuesdays and Thursdays, Eastern time. I typically start streaming at 9 a.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/csharpfritz. You can find me on Twitter. I'm csharpfritz over there. GitHub, same name. I'm on the Mastodon. You can find me out there. My Mastodon links on GitHub and Twitter and those places. There you go. Thank you.
I'm plugging everything.
I've been building. We mentioned several times. I've been building a website called Kliptok, Kliptok. That builds and is built with Blazor. It connects to a Raven DB, runs completely on Azure. I'm fighting some database performance issues right now, but check that out. You're going to see how we can present and make Twitch clips more discoverable there. Hopefully it's going to get a lot faster over the next week or two as I get more features built into it. And I have a blog out there I publish content to at jeffreyfritz.com. Thank you so much, Nick. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no.
Awesome. Well, have a good rest of your day. Over here it's evening. And I have a chat with Chat now, like I do every
Fantastic. Time. Have a good one, Chat. Go easy on Nick, all right? Will you out there? All right? Take care. Have a good one, Nick.
Bye.